So, I don't think we need a microphone, but very good morning, everyone. My name is Salzberger. I'm the director of the Hartman Center for German European Studies, and I'm very happy that we are doing this conference, 3 days conference in cooperation with the Center for German Studies in Jerusalem. Both centers actually are soon celebrating Bat Mitzvah. Yeah, 12 years. We are part of this wonderful the network of excellent centers in German and European studies, and we are very happy to have with us Pavel, who is one of the heads of the Wroclaw Center. And this activity of cooperation between the center is really maybe not what the original idea of the DAD has been, but turned out to be a real academic force in German and European studies, and this conference is in line with these very, very interesting developments. Both terrorism and migration are not a new phenomenon. They are quite an old phenomenon. But it seems that due mainly to accelerated globalization, they play a very major role, a much more significant role today than in the past. There is a lot of research about terrorism, and we have also a cooperation here with the Minerva Center, which I also had, examining the rule of law under extreme conditions, terrorism. There is a huge body of literature about migration, and indeed the Haifa Center for German European Studies put this topic as a Schwerpunkt for the current year. However, there is a very little research and literature about the intersection, the connection between terrorism and migration. And in this way, in this sense, this conference is not only very, very important, but pioneering. From looking at the titles of the paper of this 3 days conference, I see a lot of papers about terrorism, I see a lot of papers about migration, only a few papers about the connections, the intersection between migration and terrorism, and therefore I hope that this conference will foster further collaboration and research in this disciplinary way, and will make scholars encounter, which will hopefully produce more research. I also noticed from the program that the focus of the conference is really on public media arts perception of the connection between immigration or migration and terrorism, and less on the scientific side of examining the connections between terrorism and migration. We actually try to bring, as an opening lecture today, someone who will talk about facts, but we didn't find someone. So let me very briefly sum up some facts, which I didn't research myself, only secondary resources, but they can foster some emphasis, further research, and maybe also frame some of the debates and discussions we'll have here later. Okay, it seems that there is a multiple causal connection between migration, especially forced irregular migration, and terrorism. But these connections are quite complex. On the one hand, and this is maybe the part that is more the topic of many of the papers that will be given here, migration affects the level of terrorism, and in turn brings to anti-migration and anti-migrants public sentiments, brings to populism, and also contribute to the extreme right opinions and public and political power. On the other hand, and this is maybe the connection that we tend to overlook, terrorism is a major cause for migration. So the connections are both ways. So a few facts that I found, factual details, most of which I took from some recent research papers published by the International Center for the Study of Counterterrorism in The Hague. First fact, a major drive of forced migration is a severe state repression involving attacks on civilian population that in case of war, civil war especially, often also amount to war crimes and wartime terrorism. Likewise, terrorism not by state, but by non-state actors with deliberate attacks on civilians is also a major drive of forced migration. And such displacements are sometimes unintended byproduct of insurgent terrorism and sometimes deliberate policy. The more incidents of terrorism and the higher the degree of lethality, the more out-migration from an affected country has been observed. And for example, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, recent, to lesser extent, Pakistan, show that the number of first-time asylum seekers in Europe is correlated to the number of deaths from terrorism in the countries of origin. So this is a very interesting factual finding. The second finding is that this conference focuses on Europe, on Germany and Israel, but the largest population of refugees, the largest majority of refugees, estimated above 85%, is arrives to non-developing countries, which we usually don't look when we talk about this connection between immigration and terrorism. A third fact, which is very important, that refugee camps in these developing countries, but also asylum centers in the developed world, in Europe, in Israel, have also become targets of terrorist attacks. Okay? And terrorist attack, I mean, for example, if people in Germany or Sweden come and try to set on fire asylum center, this is also terrorism. No good reason to distinguish between different types of terrorism in this sense. The fourth important fact is that refugee camps and asylum seeker centers are also used by terrorists for radicalization, recruitment as a basis from which terrorist attacks are launched. This has been true, for example, for the Palestinian terrorism, as well as from attacks emanating from refugee camps in places like Pakistan and other places. Okay. More generally, countries hosting migrants from countries experiencing repression, civil war, terrorism at home, can become places of conspiracy, plotting of terrorist attacks. In the 1990s, for example, London became a crucial hub for jihadist terrorists, which made some French official called Londistan. And more recently, if we look at neighborhoods in Brussels, the Molenbeek neighborhood, it also serves such a hub of cultivating and launching terrorist attacks. Fifth fact is that some immigrants to Western countries, some children of these immigrants, have not been sufficiently integrated into the host countries, being between two cultures, some of them in search for identity and meaning look at jihadists as a role model. And consequently, some of them engage in terrorism in their host countries. Some of them migrate back to conflict areas and perform international, transnational terrorism. And the last fact is that migration control as a tool to combat terrorism, which is a tool that many Western democracies use, it might hurt bona fide migrants and legal foreign residents much more than affecting malafide terrorists. These immigration policies, rhetoric, discussion, foster xenophobia, populism, and right-wing policies. Resulting also with missing the whole advantages, and there are a lot of advantages of migration that we can talk about. In addition, there is additional danger that instruments of migration control for counterterrorism are further down the line also used to control native citizens, repression. So as you can see, the picture of the interconnection between migration and terrorism is a very complex one. And before we get to the role of the media, the social media, and other agents crystallizing public opinions and government actions, we have also to talk about the actual phenomena, the connections, the processes, and the links. But in the context of public and popular perception, and this will be my last remark, I think it's interesting to observe an interesting difference between Europe and Israel in this regard. European populism targets migrants, especially refugees or asylum seekers, blame migrants and migration for local terrorism. This is one of the problems of the sources of populism in Europe. In Israel, the immigration, the illegal immigrants, or the refugees, or the asylum seekers are accused for many things, but not for terrorism. Accused for crime, for changing the Jewish character of the state of Israel, but not really for conducting terrorism. Terrorism is attributed to the indigenous population, Arab Israelis, and not to the immigrants. So I think that this is an interesting difference which might enable more interesting analysis of both perception, media, shaping of opinions, and of course, policies. So I'm confident that this pioneering conference will really contribute to this growing field or emerging field of the connections between terrorism and migration. And it will be an important tool to enhance our research. I want to thank all the people who participate in this, the wonderful organization of this conference, of course, to Tobias on the Jerusalem side, to Adi, to Dani, to Katerina, to Michal, from the Haifa team, and I wish everyone a very, very good conference, two-day conference, Tobias.
Thank you very much, Elia. I'm really happy to be here today, and I'm really glad that we can open this conference here in Haifa. I think it's really the perfect topic to continue with our cooperation with the two centers here in Israel. And as Eli said, I think it's a topic which will need more intense discussions and conferences and other occasions to continue working on it, especially because both of our centers contribute this comparative perspective, not only looking at the specific Israeli situation, but in and from Israel also to Europe, especially to Germany, trying to understand the dynamics in public perception, but also within global developments of the facts that Eli mentioned. So first, I really want to say thank you, Eli, that you could make this cooperation working and possible. And of course, also I have to thank my colleagues here in Haifa for the great collaboration and your perfect organization of the event, Katarina, Adi, Dani, and Michal. And I also want to thank two of my colleagues, or three of my colleagues, who actually somehow came up with this idea of looking a little bit closer into the intersection between these two seemingly different, somehow connected, but still very separated discourses of terrorism on the one side and migration on the other side. So actually the idea for this conference and for looking a little bit deeper into this phenomenon came from two young researchers, Israeli researchers, Yael and Eli, who approached me with this idea. And as I already had started to deal with the phenomenon of terrorism on the one side, and also were eager to somehow respond, especially to the interest of our students in understanding the situation in Europe, confronted with refugees and migrants coming, and why this created this kind of controversy and even a crisis, so to say. That was a great opportunity to collaborate with them and also with our joint colleague Pavel, who was also part of the organization team from the beginning of this idea, and therefore I'm especially happy also that you're here, as well as all our other guests from Israel and abroad, who will contribute to a better understanding of this intersection. I think, of course, Israel is, because of many of the things Eli mentioned, a good place to talk about these intersections. Especially maybe because it seems so separated here. And also because there are so many obvious relations and blind spots at the same time. Because in a certain sense, Israel understands itself very much as a country of immigrants. Migration and immigration is very much part of the Israeli DNA. Of course, this was always a problem. On the one hand, an influx of people coming from very different and very kind of even contradictory contexts and cultures. And on the other hand, of course, creating this unifying Jewish, Zionist national identity out of this. And of course, others that are seen as foreigners, although they are part of the society or part of the land which is shared here, are questions of migration and immigration which are somehow seen as not connected to this, like illegal immigration, refugees coming from African countries, as well as working migrants coming here, and somehow, of course, changing the society. Still, in Israel, the idea that this is a kind of society by migrants is very, very clearly part of the national identity. In Germany, it took many, many years in order really to understand that Germany, of course, is like every other country in the world, an immigration country, also shaped very much by experiences of migration. And it was so interesting about 2015 when there was the debate of how to deal with refugees coming from Syria and other war-driven areas, because that was for the first time that all these references came up, that people said, yeah, but you see, we also have this migrant perspectives and experiences. Look, maybe your grandparents were expelled from the Eastern Territories after the war and migrated to Germany. Maybe you were living in the GDR, and after '89 you were also a refugee sitting in Prague in the West German embassy. So suddenly all these topics came up. But at the same time, there is still this this very intense fear of the other and of foreigners and things like that. I grew up with this because in the 1990s it was completely different. In the 1990s, when there were a lot of asylum seekers coming to Germany, it was clear that the mainstream was really very much against asylum seekers, and that was different in 2015. But still, we had a significant change in the discourse, in the policy, and also a change in the image of the German government. And this affected not only Germany, but also Eastern Europe and other countries, and it affected the whole dynamics within the European Union. So this is definitely something I hope to better understand in the following days, and somehow it has to do something with this, on this one hand, culture of fear, but on the other hand, of course, also the perception of a certain threat, which is often subsumed under terrorism without really fitting. And this is the other reason why Israel is, of course, an interesting reference point, because in contrast to Europe, which suffered some very serious terrorist attacks, of course, the dealing with terrorism in Israel is on a very different level. On the one hand, on the experience and how to deal with it in everyday life, on the other hand, questions of technology, repression, surveillance, and so on. Yeah, but especially also because somehow here, as Eddie said, terrorism is somehow disconnected from the migration perspective. And in Europe and Germany, it seemed somehow to become identical, which also led to the fact that many other aspects, which are quite important, questions about who are we, where do we want to go to, what is Europe, what is Germany, modern Germany, how do we deal, what values do we have, how do we defend our values, for example, what is the role, dimension, and importance of the memory of German atrocities, the Holocaust, anti-Semitism, things like that, somehow got lost under this fierce controversy that you are either on the side of the humanitarians or on the side of the secularization advocates. And I hope by exploring this end between terrorism and migration, we will get a better understanding of the facts, but we will also get a better understanding of the perception. And maybe this will help us also to see, again, all those things which are lost when we are just somehow following this either security or humanitarian values. Okay, so therefore, thank you very much. Again, I'm looking forward to some very intense days of discussions, talks, meeting, mingling, and I don't want to stop here and open the floor to the first panel. Thank you.